So we had this conversation about buoyancy and, you know, closed bottles and air and all that kind of stuff. And so they literally collected milk bottles, lemonade bottles, and they tied them all to the bottom of a pallet. And it worked.
Wowzers.
That's such a good... How many people could go on the raft?
It depends. One big one, I'd say, but you could put a couple of the little ones on.
No trips to A&E?
No, not for the raft.
Oh, right.
Plenty other trips to A&E, but not for the raft yet.
There should be a Catholic family's trip to A&E.
There should be,
League.
yeah.
On the top trump cards.
Yeah.
Trips to A&E, 15 or 5. Yeah.
I mean, it's usually a particular child that ends up reoccurringly going into A&E. So you'll have one that's just constantly. Joshua, about 5-6 times had his head glued. In fact, I glued it once myself.
Did you? With what?
Super glue.
Peter said this recently. I couldn't do it though. It was on Jemima's head, and I was like...
He'd been to A&E about 5 times to have his head glued, and literally they just put glue in the hole, squish it back together, and that's all they do. We were moving, he fell over, and I looked at it and I thought, you know what, they're just going to glue it. Have we got any super glue? Yep, we've got some super glue. So I put some super glue and squished it back together, and then there was a big bubble, so I stupidly got some tissue to wipe it away. And there was bits of tissue stuck in his hair for a few weeks, but it was fine. It glued together and it was absolutely, and it healed really, really well, so it's fine.
Yeah, because they don't stop bleeding, that's the problem. And it doesn't have to be a really big, like, painful cut or bruising or anything, but it just bleeds and bleeds. Poor kids. Anyway, character building, hey.
Yeah.
So we've met 7 of your gorgeous children today. One of them was a treat. We thought we were going to meet 6. And that's now just over half of the amount of children that you actually have. And it's amazing how calm your house is, how tidy it is, and how much your children will just kind of weave together. They kind of get things done. So can you go through the list of names?
The ones that are here?
Everyone, from the top.
From the top, okay, so we have Ryan. Who's not here. He's married.
And he's produced you 4 grandchildren.
Nearly 5,
oh.
due in September. And then we have Daniela, and she's married and in America. And we have Sian, she's living in London, but she's here today, so you met her today. And then we have Joshua, he's in Durham, and Jacob, and then Francesca, Isabella, Catherine, Joseph, and then Mariana, and then Anastasia and Patrick. See, I have to think about
wow, gone to the third hand. Wow. And I also noticed you didn't have a dishwasher.
Yes, we don't have a dishwasher.
Did you ever have one?
No, no. We had one at home when I was growing up, and it was forever causing arguments about who was going to put in and who was going to take out, and I just can't stand things. You just get it done. Just wash it up, dry it up, put it away and get it done. And yeah, so we don't have a dishwasher. Much to my kids' disappointments, because they quite like to put it in a dishwasher and leave it there and let somebody else put it away.
And it's because it's kind of removed from the actual event, so it's removed from like the eating, and that's why.
Yeah, I think if you put it in a dishwasher, people just leave it, don't they?
It's in the next.
Kind of, and then you have to and then you end up taking it out. You know, plates out for the next dinner, and it's out of the dishwasher, and like that really used to bug me at home. So we just decided no dishwasher.
Hey, 12 kids, we don't need a dishwasher.
Have a dishwasher. Lots of children in my dishwasher.
Oh yeah. See, that is the thing. You've got a great team. You've got a great team, and also you do chores list, an intricate system.
Blue week. So we're on this week. So yeah. So about Chaco, have you done your bathroom? I think I may have done those. Well, we have today, lunchtime. It should have been Isabella and Joseph, but obviously, oh no. You know, there are days where they don't do it, and I end up doing it, but generally speaking, the system works.
That has just brought me onto something else. You look fantastic, and you've got 12 children, and you haven't got a dishwasher, and you also home educate.
Yeah.
And it's not like your children are just, you know, wandering off after and doing nothing. They're getting degrees, first-class degrees. Very impressive family.
Thank you.
And you've organised your books really impressively for anybody that's home editing out there. Will be like, and actually all families, and just think, wow.
Well, you need to find them, don't you, really?
Yeah, you Do you have a system?
It's kind of, but I can't really explain it. It's more sort of mentally in my head. I know where certain books are for certain things, and then we go. So the books on this particular shelf are ones that we are using on a regular, everyday basis, and this is all their workboxes down here. So they all have their own particular books in their workboxes, and then there are things that might need to be shared are on the shelf, and then the other shelf here is more sort of research books and things that they don't use as much, and then in the front room, obviously the bookcase in the front room is also filled with school books. So yeah.
And so currently, how many children are you home educating?
Six.
Lovely looking baskets with lids on.
Yeah, and it will still be 6 next week. Yeah, because Jacob won't be schooling anymore, but Patrick will be. So yeah, so 6.
I see.
Yeah.
So one leaves, but
yeah.
Wow, well done, Emma. What is it that attracted you to home education? Did you always do it?
No, Ryan was in school and was doing very well in school. He really enjoyed school. He enjoyed the social side of it. He was doing quite well academically. I mean, he was only there a year, so you say academically, but he was fine. He was really enjoying it. And then Daniela went to school, and she was only there a term. Within that term, within weeks, she changed. Her character completely changed. She became really introvert. She would cry on the way to school. She would cry on the way home from school. She would cry on a Sunday, thinking that she had to go to school on the Monday. So the only day of the week we had kind of a resemblance of her was on the Saturday. But even then, she wasn't comfortable at all. She just, she really did change a lot. Even other family members would comment on how she changed, and I just thought I grew up knowing families that homeschooled, so I just thought actually maybe that's what I need to do, because I don't want my child completely miserable, and I don't want to ruin her life, basically. And that's what it felt like was happening. The teacher that she had at the time was actually a family friend. She knew my mum, and she had homeschooled her children for 2 years when they went through a family crisis. So I knew that I could talk to her off the record without it being an issue. So I spoke to her, and she just said to me, if you feel that you can home educate, I think you'll be saving her. So I just thought, well, that was it. I was just like, well, we're going to have to do it. But then I had a problem because my husband had never encountered homeschooling at all, and really he just thought that it was really going against the grain. First of all, didn't even realise it was something you could even do, and so he really needed a lot of convincing. Obviously he could see that Daniela really wasn't very happy anymore, so obviously that was swaying him a lot. But then he was worried about Ryan, because Ryan was happy in school. And so he kind of agreed and said, okay, we'll do homeschooling, but we need to ask Ryan, and if Ryan wants to stay in school, he has to stay in school. And he was 6, so we put this 6-year-old child on the sofa, and Daddy spoke to him, and Daddy was telling him what's going to happen. And then he said, so do you want to be homeschooled like Daniela, or do you want to stay in school? And he said, I'm okay, I can stay at home. And he just ran off. So that was the answer. And at the beginning, I had to check in, because Andy was so worried about ruining their lives and not doing the right thing, and all the sort of secular things you hear about homeschooling, that we had this kind of plan that we would check in every couple of months. And after about a year of doing that, it kind of fizzled out, and the only time that it kind of came up as a point would be if he had someone at work bring it up and say, oh, what, you homeschool your children, exactly? And then he'd start getting nervous again, and then it would start sort of a discussion again. But generally speaking, we never really looked back, and now he's totally and utterly for it. And obviously you can see, because the older 3 have all gone through the system and all doing things with their lives, and you can see that it's good for our family. So
had you been home educated yourself?
No.
And Andy obviously hadn't.
No.
And so how convinced were you with
me personally, I was totally convinced that it was, to me, it was just an educational choice. You can either choose to put your children in school, or you can choose to home educate your children, because I'd been around homeschooling families. But for him, it was obviously something I needed to convince him of. But now he would say that it was better having them at home than putting them in school.
But at the time, was he maybe just like, okay?
At the time, it was an completely alien thing, and I don't even know if it was such an alien thing, I don't even know if he was thinking of it in sort of educational terms. It was just the whole thing of going against the grain and, you know, having your kids at home, that's just not what people do. They send them to school. And so I don't really think that at the time he would have been able to sort of, compare as two institutions or sort of two sort of educational choices. But now he would definitely say that it's a better education.
You were brought up Catholic, and you're also one of 9.
I am, just like you.
And then, was Andy Catholic?
No, he wasn't Catholic.
And so was that something, were you practicing your faith? Was that something important to you?
No, I wasn't practicing my faith at the time when we met. I kind of lapsed when I was about 17, 18. I would, Could
you put that down to anything?
Looking back, I never lost my faith. I just didn't want to go through, I just didn't want to go to Mass on a Sunday morning, or I didn't really even think about it. It wasn't a thought process. There was no thought process there. I just got out of the Catholic habits and didn't do anything. And then when we were getting married, I just knew, life's serious now. Need to do something about this.
You were young getting married?
Yeah.
20?
21. No, 20, sorry. I was 21 just after Ryan was born. So yeah, 20 when we got married.
So you didn't mind that your husband's not Catholic?
Well, because I wasn't practicing, I didn't really think anything of it. I didn't really say that at that time in my life. I didn't sort of look at it as an issue. It was kind of, doesn't really matter. What does it matter? Yeah, exactly. What does it matter? But now, I say to my children, really, you need to marry a Catholic because it's hard work. It's really hard work. Because obviously, although I wasn't practicing my faith when I met him, because I had the good grounding and it was all there, when I got married, it was, I wanted to practice my faith. I knew that was something I would want to bring my children up practicing a faith. And so it was kind of, in a way, it was alien to him because it's not how he met me. And it kind of caused problems because you've got one that's not really with it and the other one that's trying desperately hard to follow the practices of the faith. It did sometimes cause arguments, but I wouldn't say that was the problem. It was more just like everyday living, because actually if you're trying to live your Catholic faith, it's everyday living. It comes into everything you do, and that kind of then takes over everything. But if you're kind of separate on that, then that's really hard. So I used to pray for unity. So even if he only gets to a point where he just really accepts my faith, to a point where it's not going to be an issue and he's kind of just almost going along with that, that's fine. For marriage, really, isn't it, to have that unity together? The kids used to pray for it. And actually it's really funny because when I started getting the kids to pray, we started getting the kids to pray a specific prayer for him to become a Catholic, and it came from the kids. They wanted Daddy to be a Catholic. But at that time, I wasn't doing things like the daily rosary with them because I didn't want it to be in his face. Because of my family and because of my mum and dad, and I'm one of the older ones, I'm number 2, and so there were still little ones at home when I left home when I was married, and so they were still sort of in the swing of, family rosary, all that kind of stuff. So he saw it all, he saw all that family life. And one day he said to me, "Why don't you do the rosary?" And I said, "Well, because I don't want it to be in your face. I don't, and he said, "Well, you should be doing the rosary with the children, shouldn't you?" And I was like, "Well, okay, so great, that's good." So then it was like a door though that was open. That now it doesn't matter if he walks in and I'm doing the rosary with the kids because he's actually said, you should be doing that. So that's fine.
Mama,
so.
You guys slap me with this.
Oh.
Is that true story, Jemima? So where was Andy at? So he was obviously encouraging you to do the rosary, but otherwise did you feel some sort of tension that you were doing things, maybe saying prayers for meals or something?
Yeah, so things like that, certain things like prayers before meals and stuff, he was okay with because he witnessed that in my own, family's home. When I met him, and he's always had good morals and a good sort of standard of living, I suppose, and what to expect. So his morals were always good. He used to say, he would never say that he was like an atheist or agnostic or anything. He basically would just say that he didn't believe there was anything, as in, if you do. So I don't really think that he ever really thought about it. There was not really, he just didn't think about religion at all in any way. And so if I probed and asked questions, he said, well, when you die, there's just nothing. And actually, that used to scare me. I'd be like, gosh, that's a really horrible thought, to die. And what is the point of living? To die and have nothing? I mean, that's really scary, isn't it? Just like, there's just nothing there. And it makes this life sort of a bit unbearable, actually. So, yeah, so that's where he was at. But I think a lot of it was he didn't really think about it.
And did anything bother him of what you were doing with the children?
Like, doing prayers or anything like that bothered him. But what might have caused arguments was if I needed, because when we first married, I didn't drive at first. I didn't drive until number 3. So if I needed a lift to church or anything like that, and it meant that he had to get up early on a Sunday morning, that could cause a problem. Actually, my dad would come and pick me up sometimes just so that he could just have a lay in, and my dad just knew and understood, because my dad's a convert, you see, as well. So my dad kind of understood that he, and so he would just come out. He'd say, I'll pick you up on Sunday, and then we don't have to bother Andy. Which annoyed me a lot, because I'd be like, well, why should my dad have to be driving all this way to come and pick me up and take me into church? And when you can just do it, but it did actually diffuse. Yeah, it diffused a lot of sort of potential arguments that could have happened.
And I think this is really reassuring, because our last episode we spoke about this horrid, cold 2% of people that continue the faith if their father hasn't got the faith. But statistics aside, we have the grace of God that can. Yeah. No, I mean, it's food for thought, and it's.
It's scary, isn't it, when you look at statistics like that? But I think you just have to
praying. That's powerful.
I think you just have to really just focus on prayer life with the children.
Get them on the job.
Yeah, get them on the job, but also be praying for them, and praying for them the whole time that you don't want them to lose their faith. Really, I think that's all you can do. You can't do any more than that, can you? Because when they get to that age and they might lose their faith, it's kind of out of your hands, except for prayer. That's the only thing you can do. So I think just start from when they're young, and just pray that one thing. I think it's one of the fears of a mother, isn't it, that their child loses their faith, because you're kind of like, well, that's forever. It's not, it's not a joke. It's not. It's a big deal. Yeah. To lose your faith is a big deal.
These things, Andy can, just be happy that you're doing that nice little Catholic thing with the children, the prayers and going to Mass and sacraments and things. But when it maybe does have an impact on him, at some point you've had 12 children.
Okay, so
do discussions start coming up about being open to new life?
Yeah. Okay, so that's touched on a point. When we had 3 children, sort of one after the other, and after number 3, he said, we're not having any more children. And obviously, me being one of 9, he just saw all these kids running around my house, and was just, we're not going to be like your parents. We're not having that many children. It's just not happening. So obviously, I had this conversation about the church's teachings, and then he said that he wanted me to get the opinion of a priest. So I went to see the priest, but I was quite shocked at the extent of what he said. He basically, cutting it short, told me that it's okay, he's not Catholic, so you can contracept. going home thinking, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, what? And I've never lied, you know, I've always been open. So I knew I had to tell him what he said, and I wasn't gonna lie about it. I mean, there was a temptation to, yes, he says the catechism, it says this, but obviously you can't do that, you have to tell the truth. And so I did, I told him exactly what he said, and then I sort of said, but he's wrong, because the catechism says this, and actually he shouldn't have told me that. That actually probably set him back on any kind of journey. He saw that as, you know, you've got this church teaching, but you've got a priest who's supposed to be upholding the church teaching, saying something completely contrary just because of our situation.
But everyone is making sugar.
Are they? You give the cup.
Okay.
So Emma, with your newfound and your growing Catholic faith again, obedience to your husband, and he's not Catholic, and he doesn't want more children, how did you navigate around that one? And the priest is on his side?
Yeah, it was a bit difficult. With the not wanting to have children, we kind of came to a compromise. So obviously I wasn't going to use any kind of contraception. So I really looked into NFP and kind of made him look into it as well. So you don't want any more children, so you actually have to learn about this just as I do. We went down that road with that. And then, it's a really hard question.
You had a fourth. How did the fourth come?
So the fourth came, it was him, he instigated it. So we have 4-year gap between number 3 and number 4. He, one night, just said, do you know, I think we ought to have another baby. I was like, excuse me? What? Where did that come from? And he said, I just really miss having a baby in the house. And I said, but you said we didn't want any more children. I've now got my head around not having any more children.
That's
and
an interesting guy.
Where did this come from? But he just said, you know, there was no real explanation. He just said
Maybe
he felt
this is
that,
from prayer.
I don't know. He just, I mean, he couldn't really explain where it came from. He just felt that we needed to have another baby. And then there was no more gaps. We ditched NFP and that was that. We kind of, I'd say we sort of trusted in God, but he just sort of said that he became open to life. So yeah, and I don't really know why. I don't know if there was, the more he got to know my family maybe as well, the influence of seeing the big family working. And then we also met other people that had big families. And so I don't know if maybe that was kind of the influence of that maybe had an effect as well.
Take him along to Catholic events? Did he join you in Catholic?
Some. We did more really when we started the homeschooling, because obviously wanting to meet other Catholic homeschoolers. I was really wary of taking him anywhere where it was going to be overtly Catholic, because I didn't want him to then cause a problem for. And I was really cautious of sort of it being thrown in his face, I suppose. I didn't want it to be like too big a thing.
That he would then really refuse it.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of wanted it to be more of a natural thing, and if he was going to convert, it was going to be because he wanted to convert, not because, you know, he felt that he was just in that environment and he should just do it. So, yeah.
So it was in his heart.
Yeah, yeah.
So he converted at some point.
Number 7. After number 7, he converted. He loves saying that to people as well. You know, when they say, "Gosh, you know, how many children have you got?" And he's like, "Oh, 12." "God, are you Catholic?" Well, I wasn't until number 7.
How did he convert?
That's. I grew up in Aylesbury, and we left Aylesbury when we started homeschooling and moved down to Herne Bay, because we felt we could live anywhere, so we lived by the coast. And so we were living there for 3 years, but part of the move in there was he promised, because obviously my parents were helping me in Mass with my young children, he promised that he would help me and he'd come to Mass. And so obviously I was like, oh yeah, sure, let's move. You're not going to come to Mass with me. So he came to Mass, and he came every week, and he'd look after the baby at the back of church, and, you know, in fact, that's actually how we ended up with St. Teresa's, our patron saint of our family, and it's because he was carrying Joshua at the time as a baby at the back, and it was at the time where we were looking for a patron saint of the family, and he one day just announced it should be St. Therese, and I thought, why on earth should it be St. Therese? And he said, well, it's the only statue that he's quiet in front of. So I said, okay, we'll go with it. So she became patron saint of our family. But yeah, so he was coming to mass, and
was that before he was Catholic? He declared that.
Yeah. Wow. I know. But I suppose because he was just listening to me talking to the children about having a patron saint, and then he was with this child at the back of church, and it was that statue that he was quiet in front of, so he just felt, I suppose it's his input, so we just went with it anyway. He got a job in the Isle of Man, and we moved to the Isle of Man, and without me knowing was seeing a priest, because he used to ask all sorts of questions, and I say, just speak to a priest, because I'd start answering them, and then he'd come back with more, and it could get really heated, and then I just get really irate because he's like asking too complicated questions, or he's asking questions and he's trying. It's always, I felt like he was trying to trip me up, and I suppose in a way when people are searching, they are trying to trip you up because they're trying to find a flaw or something, because they don't really want to find what they know that they're going to find.
And maybe you wanted to find something they could really trust. Is there any flaws? Is this something?
Yeah. But it was really within the marriage. That's really hard to you don't really want those kind of. So I remember speaking to my mum about it. My mum just said, just calmly say, just go and speak to a priest. Just speak to a priest. If you want to ask a question, speak to a priest. But he was, and I didn't know. I had no idea at all.
How long?
It might have been 18 months actually that he was actually regularly speaking to a priest. The priest that he was speaking to regularly came to our house because we were parishioners, we were a big family. I think we were the biggest family on the Isle of Man. We only had 5 at the time, but we were classed as the big family. And he was just became a family friend. And so when we moved back and we were in Margate, and we were started going to traditional mass. Actually, there was a traditional mass in Margate, and that's when we began the traditional mass. And he came out of church one day and just announced that he was going to be a Catholic, and I didn't believe him. I actually genuinely did not believe him at all. I just said, I don't believe you. And then he obviously was getting a bit upset that I didn't believe him. And then I actually said to him, that's really nasty. I think it's really a really cruel joke to say that you're going to be a Catholic. Just stop it now. That's enough. And he just looked at me, deadpan, straight in the face, and said, I am going to be a Catholic. I've just spoken to the priest, and he's just given me this catechism. And I was like, oh, I feel really bad. I'm really sorry. Oh my gosh, Dad's going to be a Catholic. Dad's going to become a Catholic. So it was just really crazy. And he was told to read the catechism, and anything in the catechism that he had an issue with, we'll start at that point, and then we'll go from there. So he read the catechism. It was a penny catechism, not like a great big thing. He read it through, and he said, I don't have a problem with any of it. I said, well, just tell the priest you don't have a problem with any of it then. So he was already, and I think obviously the foundations of what the priest from the Isle of Man, he'd obviously asked all those questions, and he'd been through all that already. So it's almost like he'd already been through. He said, yeah. So yeah.
Wow. And then how long afterwards he became a Catholic? Like months or something?
It was about a month, yeah.
So then you're a Catholic family with a Catholic husband, and then everyone probably thinks, oh, it's easy for you, you've got a Catholic husband.
Yeah, but
little did they know. Oh, wow. So when Andy became Catholic, doesn't seem like the sort of guy that would suddenly change everything. He carried on.
No, he didn't change. No.
Apologised to you for all those years.
No. Obviously, he changed spiritually, but not as character. He just is the same person, but obviously now shares the same belief as the family. And obviously, one thing that
he's not gone on soppy, has he?
No, he hasn't gone soppy. The one thing that he did say that he really felt like he was missing out from what the rest of the family were doing. So when we go to mass and everyone would go up to receive communion, he wasn't part of that, and he felt like that he was kind of missing out on something. I suppose his life has got different purpose, because obviously now he sees it as we're trying to raise our children to become saints, and we're trying to get each other to heaven, and that's something that he now acknowledges, but his character didn't change at all. No.
We've got lots of people that are watching whose husbands aren't Catholic, and they've been looking for somebody who's had a husband that's not Catholic, to share a bit with us. Any influence?
A few. So when he first experienced a traditional mass, that was a big influence. I've heard this happen before as well, but he came out of mass and just said, now I understand why people go to church. I tried to get him to elaborate, but he couldn't really put it into words, but he just said that the whole mass, there was something different about that mass, and he felt something different, and he was moved by that mass. But also, I think, family friends that we had that were living their Catholic faith, and so he was influenced by them as well. Sometimes, like, we've encountered some sort of Catholic families that kind of, I don't know, things seem to be a bit disjointed. You get the husband doing one thing and the wife doing another thing, and I think the unity is key. Family life, I think unity is key. You need to sort of be together and be together as a family and doing things as a family.
And if you hadn't seen other Catholic families and how it works, I mean, you'd obviously seen your mum and dad, but it's easy to say, you know, that's what the other generation have done, but to see others in the same, you know.
And with children the same age as your children, that kind of thing, which is obviously a good for the children as well, because they've got their friends.
Normal.
Yeah, and they are totally normal, having normal jobs, normal lives, normal everything else, but they share their faith.